One of the most important relationships you'll ever establish is your relationship with money because you see, it simply doesn't just influence your bank account, but your relationships and how the rest of your life is dictated. In one way or another, it has a tremendous impact on your confidence, purpose, and the belief in the life that you believe is possible. It's estimated that approximately only 16% of Americans describe themselves as being financially fulfilled. Meanwhile, for the rest of us, between 85 and 90% say that they experience some sort of financial stress or worry. It's a two-way street for many of us because, you see, it's a two-sided challenge. It isn't simply about earning money. It's about developing a healthy relationship with it. In this episode of Let's Have This Conversation, I sit down with my friend Matt Morizio. He is an entrepreneur, the founder of Reconstructing Wealth. He's also a former minor league catcher and pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. He's a devoted husband and father of a whole gaggle of children. And he says he is a man whose faith has influenced the way he views life and his finances. Matt shares how changing his relationship with money has positively impacted every area of his life, including a better relationship with his wife, his kids, with sleep, a greater intentional relationship with peace and intentional purpose rather than viewing wealth as simply accumulating dollars. He tells me why true financial freedom begins with shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance. We explore why so many people continue to be trapped by the concept of financial anxiety. Why understanding the game of money can unlock greater opportunities and aligning your finances with your values can help you build a life that you no longer want to escape from, but rather enhance and multiply. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an organizational leader, a high performance individual, or simply someone looking to gain enhanced clarity and confidence surrounding your finances, this conversation provides you some practical avenues in order to accomplish that very goal. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShan. Let's have this conversation. Matt, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you about everything finance and relationship with money and a little bit about sports and baseball as well. It's great to see you, and happy Wednesday to you, my friend.
Great. Yes, happy Wednesday, man. I'm fired up. Yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely. Now, Matt, I'm curious to ask you why you believe our relationship with money is so important, and why do you think so many people around the country need to reevaluate their relationship with money and how that relationship can affect the rest of their life, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Gosh, I have a lot of thoughts. The first thought that I have, as you say that idea came to me just through thousands of conversations with people about their money. Just because as a financial advisor, that's what people talk with me about a lot of the times. And after, like I said, thousands of those combos, I realized that, dang, a lot of people carry a lot of anxiety and unhealthy emotions about their money, when in the reality, money's unemotional. Money's just an object. It's a value exchange. It's just something to help us fuel our callings. But I went on my own personal journey first. I mean, I didn't know I had a problem, meaning I didn't know I had an unhealthy relationship with money until I did, until I started to talk to some people who actually have really good relationships with their finances, meaning like they they are emotionally detached as much as possible from their money. That's what I would define as a healthy relationship with money. And so having convos with people like that, they started to talk to me about how they viewed and used money, and it was different than anything I knew, anything I heard, and it was arguably a whole lot healthier because they were less stressed, less emotional. I carried this burden. So to answer your question, why should people change it? I carried this weight with me unknowingly kind of everywhere I went. Sometimes it was heavy. Sometimes I knew it was there because I couldn't figure out how to pay certain bills. I knew there was groceries plus mortgage plus some other things that I all had to get paid. And I have 8 children now, and that's only been in the last 15 years. So I've basically been growing exponentially in my family, and my expenses follow. So I've felt that weight. And it was through the journey of realizing first that I had a problem, and then going on this deep introspective journey of understanding where did that come from, which I've learned most of us catch it from our parents. More is caught than taught with kids, and we usually don't talk or teach about money in the household, so we catch whatever our parents think about money, and often their parents are Great Depression era children. So I've learned after having all of these combos, understanding how people view and use money, the healthy and the unhealthy, I just recognize that true financial freedom to me, and this might be the hill that I die on, Kevin, it is not necessarily having enough money to fund your life. Yes, that means work is optional and you have a lot of choices and time freedom. But I've met enough people today that carry this anxiety and this weight every day of their lives, even though they have enough money by definition to be financially free. They're worried, especially if the market's down. They're wondering, am I going to be okay? Am I going to recover? And to me, what kind of freedom holds you hostage, holds you in bondage every day of your life? So to me, true financial freedom is learning to emotionally detach from your money.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about emotionally detaching from your money in just a second, but I'm curious, Matt, if I can take you back to your 6-year-old self, because you tell me that in your preschool yearbook, you wrote that you wanted to be a professional baseball player, and you chased that dream until you were 26, spending 5 years in the minor league system with the Kansas City Royals, my friend. Looking back on that experience and journey, what did that teach you about discipline, perseverance, and doing things differently than anybody else? Because you also say that you've lived an unconventional dream for the duration of your life. So I'm wondering if you can reflect on that for me, my friend.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Great insight. At 6 years old, I did. I wrote that in my yearbook because I really wanted it to happen. And now I wasn't alone though. There were other pro athletes. There were firefighters. There were astronauts. There was veterinarians. Like all of the 6-year-old dreams. But I kind of held on to that, and it was a bit of a declaration of sorts, I suppose. And I chased that dream. At first, it was just fun, and I loved the game, and it never stopped being fun. I should say that, but I was chasing it because I enjoyed it. But I started to get competitive. Fast forward to like 10, 11, 12, especially 14, 15, 16. I realized I was good. I was better than most of my teammates, most of everybody I was playing against. And that's not to like toot my own horn. I was just realizing, hey, there's a chance here. I could do something with this. But then came the other realization that you talked about was the unconventional path. I knew that if I wanted to get to the next level, which would be, to me, it was D1 athletics, and then beyond that was pro sports. If I wanted to get there, I understood the majority statistic. I knew most weren't going to play sports at a collegiate level, never mind professional level. Therefore, if I wanted to make it to that level, I had to observe and emulate the people that also were at that level, which meant I couldn't watch my teammates and my friends and emulate them and do what they did because statistically none of them were going to make it. And so that's where I really honed in on the idea of, if you want an extraordinary life, or if you want a life to live that most others can't live and won't live, then by definition, extraordinary means you are going to not fit in because you're going to be extraordinary. You are going to have to do things that most others won't or can't or don't want to do. And you're going to have to do that probably for a prolonged period of time in order to achieve that level of success, achieve the level of success that 99% plus of people won't get to. And that's really goes back to that that part of your question about perseverance and discipline. That's where that was all really, I want to say born in me, but I think it was in me. It was really like pulled out of me then in that early season of life where I was like, man, if I want this thing to happen, I have to pursue it in a way that is unconventional and almost relentless, because other people will stop at some point and I can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we transition back to our relationship with money, I'm curious to ask you about your opinion about the changes we've made in baseball, my friend, because, we've made it sort of a faster game. You only have a certain number of mound visits now, and obviously the pitch clock has been implemented to sort of speed up the game of baseball, and the collective bargaining agreement also expires at the end of the year. So I'm curious to ask you about the changes that we've made in baseball and your opinion on the health of the game, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, you know what, I will say, as a broad statement, I've really liked some of the changes. Baseball is a business. At the end of the day, it runs because fans are buying tickets and merchandise. That's what it boils down to. That's why players can get paid the salaries they're paid, because a lot of people are paying tickets and buying merchandise to go see these people play. So no fans means there's no business. There's no revenue coming in. It's only money going out, and that's not a really good business. So with that being said, a lot of these changes are made out of feedback from the fans. It's a slow game. It's boring. They were losing fan base because of that. America's pastime, it was a fun thing to do when people had more patience and maybe more time. They would go to the game. They would miss an inning and a half, 2 innings while they're getting a hot dog and having a conversation, and it kind of didn't matter because baseball's a slow game and you can catch back up. But I think with the modern day attention span, people are realizing, like, hey, we're losing fans when we have these long drawn out games. So things like the pitch clock, I think, have done a great job for keeping fans engaged. It also doesn't allow for players to showboat as much. And some might say that's a bad thing, but I think in general, when there's showboating and there's emotions that are displayed, it happens anyway. I think a lot of the stuff was just slowing down the game. And then you have things like the pitch recognition, that they can challenge the pitch. I didn't know that I was going to like that. I thought, hey, umpire error, human error, that's part of the game. That's the allure of baseball. But I've actually really enjoyed like the suspense and the element of having calls overturned, because it sometimes changes the trajectory of the game. And again, the fans are more engaged because they see this pitch. It's a call that went one way, then they challenge. Now there's an element of suspense, like, oh, is it going to stay or go? Like, this is another thing that engages fans. And at the end of the day, I think that the changes being made by and large have improved the fan experience and have not really derailed the value of the game, and so I like them overall.
Yeah, and just one final follow up with that. You've got 8 kids, so you've got a unique perspective on this. The price of tickets for sporting events has really priced out the average fan in some sports, and certainly in baseball, with the collective bargaining agreement coming up to its conclusion at the end of the year. I wonder your thoughts on the price of doing business with a common fan in terms of their ability to afford going to the actual game versus staying at home. And then with baseball's collective bargaining agreement coming up to its end, I'm wondering if you think a protracted lockout is possible and what that will do for the popularity and people's interest to go watch baseball. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Those are loaded. That's a loaded question, especially the second half. But I do hate that baseball has become even more expensive. Sports in general, but yeah, it prices out a lot of people from games, and that's unfortunate. Um, I I wish I could change that, though. It's hard to say that it's overpriced if someone's willing to pay it. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so as so long as purchases are being made, tickets are being sold, fans are showing up to the game, there's nowhere in the free market that's telling any owner or anybody else that it's too expensive, you know? And so I think you see that a lot in housing today. You think, man, these homes are overpriced. What in the world? And then somebody goes and pays that price for the home. And so the market tells you what price is fair and what isn't. And if you believe in capitalism, like I love it, like I do, I think that when it truly is overpriced, capitalism will tell you, and you're going to have to bring prices down. So I think that I don't have an answer to lowering the prices, but I have a hard time saying it's too overpriced when tickets are still being sold. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's a weird combination because I can't take I'm not taking all my kids to the game because I'm like there's no way I'm paying that, but others are, and so it's like, well, I can't get angry if others are filling seats. And then in terms of collective bargaining, I do think there's a real chance for a protracted lockout. I really do. I think the owners and the players have to get a little bit more aligned on the goals. The goals being give the fans what they want and give them the experience they deserve. And I think the alignment on that is currently misaligned. I think that owners see that one way. I think players see that differently. And I have a hard time believing that there's going to be a fast reconciliation on that. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I do. If you want to make if we're going to make predictions here, hard calls today, I think there's going to be some lockout. I don't know how long it's going to go, but I don't think lockouts in general are good for any sport. Unfortunately, I think lockouts in general detract the fan base. I think that any fan watching it is unattracted by players saying no to these agreements because from a fan's perspective, these players are paid how much money, and they're saying it's unfair to get paid a different amount. Like, it's a different stratosphere, totally different conversation. So I think across the board, it's a losing situation whenever there's a lockout in any sport because the common fan's going to say those players are being greedy. The players are going to say the owners are being greedy. The owners are going to say the players don't get what the fans need. We do. There's everybody pointing fingers and nobody's agreeing. And at the end of the day, the fan suffers. So I don't think any lockout's ever a winning scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good transition to, ironically, emotionally detaching from money. And when people hear that and say they have to emotionally detach from their finances, I'm wondering what does that actually look like in practice, in your opinion? And how can freedom be achieved if we emotionally detach from money? What are the steps there, my friend?
Yeah, that's a fair question because when you say emotionally detaching from money, that sounds kind of like Pollyanna, like pie in the sky thinking, like, yeah, sounds good. I don't even know what that means, though. I don't even have, I don't think I have emotions toward money, you know? Um, so I'd equate it to this first to give like a perspective in a different but similar vein. People often emotionally eat. Now, they don't say they emotionally eat, but when they do a little bit of introspective work and realize when they eat, why they eat, what they're eating, they can kind of connect dots to say, dang, anytime I'm stressed or overwhelmed or sad or whatever the emotion is, I tend to grab the ice cream, grab the chips, grab whatever, and I just eat not because I'm hungry, but because it fills that void or passes time or gets my mind off of the thing that I'm stressed about. Whatever it is, people, if they sit and do some work on that, they realize like, yeah, there's an emotional connection to food. And when they can detach from that and instead learn that food is fuel for your body, it isn't an emotional pacifier, then I would say in that same vein, you can do that with money. You can start to realize like your spending habits or how you feel when you open the bank account, the bank statement, or what you think about wealthy people, like collective bargaining agreement. Like, what are your thoughts? How do you emotionally feel about those athletes paid tens and hundreds of millions of dollars saying this is an unfair deal? Like, what is your knee jerk response there? Maybe that isn't indicative toward how you feel about wealthy people, and maybe there's some work to be done in there. Maybe they aren't the problem. You know what I mean? And I would challenge people to do some introspective work on that. The steps to take is that exactly first. Do some deep dive introspectively, and I would say a great starting point for that question to say, okay, well, I don't even know where to start if I'm going to sit and work introspectively. You would say, define, or give me a story from childhood that really exemplifies how you think about money, how you view money, how you use money, how you relate to money. And once you understand that story, you start to uncover and peel back the layers of the onion of where did that come from? How did I learn that? Why do I feel that way? Why is that still with me? And you start to get a bigger picture, more clear picture on where it's all coming from. And then the next step is to figure out how do you change it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the two clearest paths to changing your relationship with money, how you view money and use money, is the long game and the short game. The long game is getting educated on how the game of money works and starting to read, understand philosophies, learn the language of money, understand what debts are. Like, you actually just do the homework on it, get to know the thing. My experience, fear of money often is fear of the unknown. It's not fear of the money itself. People just sort of take the ostrich approach of bury their head in the sand when they're a young professional and hope in 40 years, 30 years, whatever it is, that they saved enough money and it grew enough that they're okay. Like, but if you instead tear that wall down of education and no longer live in fear of the unknown, you start to know that thing, you start to sort of it loses its grip on you, I should say. So I would say get educated on that, and I have plenty of other thoughts, but I'll leave that there. The other piece, the shortcut to changing a relationship with money, I said there were two ways. The long way was education. The short way is generosity. Really giving money away, and it doesn't matter how much, it matters much more of the act of doing it and the heart and the discipline behind it. If you can freely set aside money, which I do, I have this separate account. It's called a blessing account. It's an account for other people. Every time I get paid, 10% of it just goes right to that account. And I'm like, that money's for other people. That's not for me. What that does subconsciously, now I have to say this like with asterisks, you have to do this out of like a genuine heart posture. You can't do this because you want something in return. That's just selfishness disguised as generosity. But
Mm-hmm.
if you are sincerely generous, like okay, I'm going to go down this exercise and I'm going to start this process, your subconscious starts to rewire how it thinks about money. And I actually talked to PhDs about this, friends of mine, because I wasn't understanding on a like a clinical level what's actually happening to me. I just knew what I was feeling. So I articulated that whole blessing account and my emotions toward it process. And they told me in layman's terms, your subconscious was once hoarding this fear emotion toward money. The fear emotion of worried about losing it, gripping it tightly, not wanting to overspend, thinking things are too expensive, like that kind of stuff. And I kind of crossed the bridge to the stronger emotion of a love based emotion around money, which was I am setting aside money to give toward other people. And in psychology, they always say love's the strongest of all emotions. So as I consistently started to put money away and then use it actually in practice on other people, subconsciously my brain was rewiring itself saying, hey, guys, we no longer fear this thing that we used to worry about, this money. We actually are giving it to people. We're freely releasing it. So no longer do we have to fear and have anxiety around it because actually we're good to give it. And subconsciously, I quite literally rewired my brain unintentionally. Well, I didn't know I was doing that, but that's a really powerful way to shortcut your way to change your relationship with money.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, I'm curious because you spent 5 years of your life competing at the highest levels of baseball. And I'm curious how that competitive, mindset and growth mindset in sports has made you a better financial advisor, and how those traits have transitioned to the second part of your life. And then secondarily, I'm curious to ask you about the transition away from sports and coming up with your new identity once you knew sports was over for you. How did you make that successful transition, my friend?
I would say the disciplines and that pursuit of excellence that I learned in sport has served me really well as a financial advisor, but I don't think it particularly is exclusive to helping me in finance. I think it's just served me well in all areas of my life. It's my belief that people are happiest when they're growing and when they're giving. And that pursuit of excellence is an impossible destination. You can never be perfect. So but if you're pursuing it at the highest level, you learn that the juice kind of is in that journey. And I learned that I wasn't actually as exhilarated when I hit the targets. It was a much more fun thing to build toward something new. So as an athlete, that was exciting when I learned a new pitch or I worked on something in my swing that was off and I was able to take better swings on the ball. Like that was an endless pursuit, minor tweaks, but like that pursuit of excellence was always part of the journey. And now that's carried over to all parts of my life as a parent, as a financial advisor, as a business owner, as a husband. And so that part from sport to real life has really served me quite well when I'm in control of it. If it controls me and now it becomes this like pursuit of an idol and I'm losing track of the things that matter, like I'm not taking care of my fitness, I'm ignoring my wife, my kids don't see me, then it's a problem. Then you're pursuing the wrong thing. But understanding the juices in the journey and just keeping that all in check in a healthy order, for me, faith, family, fitness, finance, in that order, keeping that healthy order, that's actually really served me quite well. But the identity thing is real. Like I was a baseball player from 5 years old or whatever it is till 26, 6 to 26, we'll call it 20 years. I couldn't even avoid that identity shift if I tried to, meaning like if I knew enough back then to even work on my identity to know baseball is what I do, it's not who I am. Even if I tried to make that identity change in my 20s, I was still externally reinforced by people that I would come across to with. They'd say, "Oh yeah, you're the baseball player." When you're playing in the middle of nowhere minor leagues, you stick out like a sore thumb when you're out to lunch that day, going out before you go to the ballpark that afternoon. And so people in those random towns would see us and they knew we were baseball players. I would go home to my hometown in Massachusetts when I was in the off seasons, and people would see me and say, "Oh yeah, yeah, no, I remember you're the baseball player, right?" Like, so I couldn't even escape that identity. And the problem with tying your identity to what you do, something that will eventually end, is that exactly that. You are that thing until you're not. And
Hmm.
so I was a baseball player until I was 26 and got a call during spring training to say, "Hey, we're going to release you tomorrow." I was no longer a baseball player. And so I had to go on this hard emotional journey of, well, if I'm not a baseball player, then what am I? And that was the wrong question. The better question is, who am I? And when I was young, it was my parents kind of were my rock, and then they divorced early, and I really clung to baseball as my rock and my identity, and then that failed me, and I learned, geez, I've got to learn to tie an identity to something that's not going to let me down, that's not going to fail me, and so for me, it became my faith. I'm really grateful for getting released, having that 20-year dream stripped from me because it forced me to dive deep into my faith. And now that's central to who I am and all the decisions I make and now all the other things, financial advisor, entrepreneur, husband, father, coworker, business owner, like those are what I do, parts of me, but they aren't who I am. So that's actually probably one of the biggest blessings coming out of having a 20-year dream stripped from you was that identity shift and understanding right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about an identity shift, and I want to, translate that into finances because a recent Capital One and Decision Lab survey found out that more than 1 in 4 Americans say, say that they deal with financial stress, and it affects, their relationships, and more than 3 quarters feel anxious and stressed about finances overall, and over half say that money accounts for their life and how they sort of account for their identity. So when you hear those statistics, I'm curious to get your thoughts on how we can help people alleviate stress when it comes to money, and what are your overall statistics when you hear about how Americans view their relationship with money and their stress level? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I need to find that survey. That's a really powerful survey, and that probably will serve my message pretty well.
I'll,
So
I'll do,
thank you for
I'll,
that.
I'll do you a favor and send it to you. How about that?
Oh man, that would be huge because that survey that I didn't know existed until right now. Thank you, Kevin, for that. Is that that's hitting the heart of why I exist as a firm. That's why I named it Reconstructing Wealth because I know firsthand how my life has changed as I've reconstructed my relationship with money. And so I want to do that for other people because I recognize that if I can do it in my life, it's not just me, it's my family that's impacted. And it's not just my family because I know that I'm teaching healthy mindsets, healthy habits around money to my kids who are then going to go and do their own things in the world in a healthier way than I did. And then they'll pass that on to their kids and the generational impact, the ripple effect of that is it's unquantifiable, to be quite honest. So if I take that in my own life and my own family tree, and you think 4 generations down, we'll say, and I can do that in hundreds of other clients' lives, and then their kids' lives, and then those kids' lives, then I can quite literally, in a few generations' time, I think I can quite literally change the way generations view and use money. Um, but it doesn't change the fact that the reality, according to that study, is that 3 quarters of people are anxious about money. Here's what I would say to that is that I would challenge people to think about, well, aside from everything we've talked about, go on a deep dive introspectively to say, where's that all coming from as a kid? Where did you learn that? If you could think of one question, it can start to reframe money for you. And the question is instead of how much does it cost, start to think, is it worth it? Because price and worth are very similar on paper, and they're opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of mindsets. The wealthy, the healthy around money think in terms of worth way more than they think in terms of price. The unhealthy, the unwealthy, the poor, they think in terms of price almost always. There's a book out there, Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's super popular. He talks about his rich dad in the book, uh, about that, exactly that. His question, I think, the way he frames it in the book is not can I afford it, but how can I afford it? That one word, how, right in front of that question, totally change your wiring around affordability and, in turn, anxiety toward money. And it kind of eliminates the scarcity mindset that is carried when you think about the anxiety around finances. It's very real that life is really expensive and incomes aren't keeping pace with all the expenses around us. Inflation. Inflation's, they say 3% ish. I don't believe it. Like my personal life has gotten much more expensive than 3% per year. Um, and the reality is that people's salaries, their wages, are not keeping up at the same pace that things are costing us. So I get that. Like there is truth to it. But if you never choose to do the work on your own self around money and how you figure it, how you feel toward it and how you view it and how you use it, then you'll perpetuate the problem even if you have tons of it.
Yeah. And Matt, I say that this part of your life, you're living in what you call the messy middle. And you've got eight kids now, and I'm wondering your thoughts on managing professional and family life, and also your thoughts on the whole idea of homeschooling your kids, running a business, and balancing everything in between that comes with family. What does the messy middle look like for you in practice, my friend, and how do you do it effectively? I'm curious.
Sure. Well, the messy middle on a day to day is basically pure chaos is what it looks like. I mean, um, it doesn't even start at 5:30 in the morning when I'm waking up. It starts middle of the night. Let's say that I finally can get the kids down at 10:30, for example, even because someone was fussy or whatever, and then a few hours later, a couple hours later, not even, baby's crying, she needs to be fed. Then another 3-year old he'll walk into the bedroom and sleep in our bed that evening, and then maybe the 5-year old also does, and now there's 4 of us in the bed, five, um, and then you're up trying to say like, okay, let's take on the day. And I go and I always start my day with coffee and then quiet time. I get into prayer. I just sort of do some reading. But today, for example, that started, and immediately my 3-year old woke up extra early, and so he joined me in that a little bit, which means it's distracted for me. I'm with him, but now I got to go get him as a bottle and I get him set up, and then thankfully I have a home gym, so I go into the gym. But then he joins me in that, so now my workouts have an audience,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I would say, like that day, that just continues on through the entire day. I made them breakfast, and then I had to get to work, and they have 7 different activities, I think, today collectively among them all. And what I will say is the messy middle for me with 8 kids, the healthiest outcome of it all is that I recognize that all day, 24 hours a day, I'm not living for me. And I actually think that's really healthy. If I rewind back to when I had one child, just months prior to that, I had 0 children, right? So I was all about me, and I would never have defined myself as a selfish person. I would never have said that. But I recognized when I had my first child, and now when I'm supposed to eat, I had feeding windows, I had training windows. I was super organized and structured. If you moved my sunglasses on my dresser a little bit, I noticed it. I was like almost OCD with all of it. I was super disciplined, regimented, structured. And now I try to eat when I'm supposed to eat, but I can't because the baby just pooped through his everything and he has to get totally changed. Okay, we're trying to leave at a certain time, but trying to get him in the car seat is now taking an extra 10 minutes because I'm fumbling my way through these new buckles and stuff, and now we're late, and now I'm frustrated. Like it was one thing after the other that I had these expectations of time and personal time, and I got none of it. And actually, eventually, I broke probably four kids in, and I realized like, dang, Matt, like you've got to let go. And now I live to serve in a lot of ways, and I think that's really healthy. So to me, that's what the messy middle for me really looks like, and I don't actually lie to myself and try to balance it all. Instead, what has really worked for me are two things. I keep the priorities that I told you about earlier: faith and family, the and then finance. And so I keep and I make sure that I prioritize different things. And so when I'm with those things, the time I've allocated toward those things, I bloom where I'm planted, as Dabo Swinney says. He's just bloom where you're planted. And so I think about that. It's like if I can keep a loose schedule, because my schedule is forever changing because of something happens with one child and another child. But as long as I have like moving blocks within a day that I know I've allocated time toward the things that matter, then when I'm in that thing, like I'm on this show right now, I'm all in on this show. I'm not out thinking about my kids or distracted about whatever, because I'm here now and this is the planned time for today, because I also know that I've got time with kids later on, and I recognize like I can't be equal, and that's not life anyway. So instead, to me, the word balance really just means blooming where I'm planted when I'm supposed to be there.
Yeah, that's an interesting and effective way to put it. And, that transitions into the next thing I wanted to cover with you, and that's the financial confidence of America. Because our friends over at Gallup Math, they recently found that more than half of Americans feel financially conflicted. That they're financially okay in some places, but they're conflicted in others. And they really have felt that financial pressure. And only about 16%, this study also found that only about 16% of Americans feel financially fulfilled. So when you hear those statistics, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, the current financial confidence in America today and how we can improve that, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
I think that's probably true. Well, that's what the survey says, so the survey says what it says. But I think my own anecdotal experience, I think that's probably true. And here's the phrase that, as you were asking that question, was sort of ringing in my head: clarity breeds confidence. And so I think a lack of confidence in people's financial futures or the current financial state, it comes because there's a lack of clarity around where they're at and where they need to be. And it all feels sort of muddied and anxiety inducing because there's no real clarity on any of it. So my challenge and my argument is, and my experience when I start to help people just get clear on their money and figure out like what do they need, where are they going, how do we get there, that kind of stuff. Once the clarity happens, it's like the scales fall from the eyes, or like the light starts to shine on the stuff that was once in the dark. There's a degree of confidence that comes with that clarity that they never had. They didn't know how to find it. They didn't know it existed. So I think in that survey of America, most Americans just don't know what's happening with their finances. And that's where the anxiety is coming from. I'd be willing to bet that if every one of those people in that survey were also forced to write a budget, track their money for 3 months, come up with a plan to understand where they want to go, how much they need to get there, and then reverse engineer a way to make enough money to get to that thing. If they just had that, I'm not saying their financial life changed at all. they just got really clear on a lot of the stuff that they don't know right now. I bet you that survey flips, and it's the total opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I want to talk to you about financial affordability. As you said earlier in our discussion, everything in America is becoming more expensive, and people are becoming, overwhelmed with the affordability concerns that we're living through today. So I'm curious, when people come to you as a financial and wealth advisor, how do emphasize with the fact that everything is more expensive, and how do you help them sort of navigate the affordability concerns we're living through today, my friend?
It's an uncomfortable and necessary conversation, and it's probably the most unspoken topic, I think, by financial advisors, because it's a really difficult one to control. We financial advisors love to try to control all the future. You do this, you invest here, you do this, like trust it for the long term. The statistics say this, but the reality that most advisors don't talk about and need to is that a lot of responsible adults don't necessarily have a spending problem, they have an income problem. And most advisors have a hard time talking about an income problem, because when you have a spending problem, you can look at a budget and track it and figure out what expenses to cut to try to improve the spending problem. What I've experienced, having done this with plenty of people, like I said, thousands of combos, hundreds of plans, I've realized that when you start to trim fat, most responsible parents, young kids, doing all the right things they can, working hard, they don't have a lot of fat to trim unless you really want to dramatically change their lifestyle. And so the conversations shift from, hey, what can we cut out of your budget to really improve your finances, to, hey, do you think you're on the right bus? Meaning, do you think this career is the right career for you? Are you in the right spot? A lot of times it's just the spot they landed on because they sort of drifted to that destination through a series of, this person introduced me to this person, this thing happened, this job landed on my lap. But it's not often a calling. It just feels like they drifted into that new position. And I will say all the time, people never drift to a destination they intended to get to. And so the conversation really starts around, okay, what do you feel called to do? And secondly, how can we make some more money doing it? Or how can we make some more money on the side while you're doing the thing you're doing right now, as you start to sort of rethink your calling and rethink your career? Side hustles become a reality. And I think we live in a day and age where, shoot, if you're creative enough and committed enough, you can find ways to make more money. And sometimes it's just an income problem more than it is a spending problem.
Yeah, and building on that last answer, you said that building good financial habits is more than, building wealth. It's about looking at the, whole trajectory of your life and really putting that through an assessment. And I know that you've worked with entrepreneurs, highly successful executives and athletes, and you've discovered patterns along the way. And I'm curious about those patterns that you've discovered about highly successful people and how they manage their money, not only in the business world, but personally. And what do you think is the secret to developing great financial habits? What are your thoughts there?
The funny thing about ultra high performers, people are just really high capacity people, high performing, high achieving individuals, especially when you talk about entrepreneurs or athletes or people who are really experts in their craft. They tend to really know the numbers in their craft, in their business, or an athlete on the field. They know the numbers really well. They understand what they need to do, how they need to execute in order to achieve the quarterly, annual success, 5-year plan, whatever the plan is. They have a real clear picture on it. and then they work hard to execute on it. And of course, the numbers change, the goals change, and they adjust, course correct. That's like such a common thing for them. Here's the really funny part though, is when it comes to their personal finances, most of the time it's a lot like the Wild Wild West, meaning they don't have to nearly the same degree of clarity on their personal finances that they do on their professional ones, on their business finances. And so they have to have somebody like me step in to say, "Hey, look, I know you're not willing or wanting to pay attention to this as much as I am, but it does need attention." And coaching them on it being no different than how they run a business P&L. It just happens to be a personal one. Teaching them like using the same language actually bridges the gap quite well. And so that's what I've learned is becomes a best practice is to say, okay, what do you do in your business? How do you handle the numbers in your business? Okay, great. What would that look like on the personal side? And how can I support you in that? How can I help create some of those documents or just help you understand what you don't understand? And that actually ends up becoming a huge unlock for them because they spend all the time planning and budgeting and creating forecasts and marketing budgets and all the things on the professional side. And it's like, wait, I could do that on my personal side. Instead of a marketing budget, maybe it's a vacation budget or something. Like maybe it's if they want to use that language. But it's like allocating funds to do something is very commonplace for them in business, super foreign on the personal side until you shine a light on it again, you get clarity. Clarity breeds confidence, and all of a sudden they become superheroes and they're like, I know what I'm doing here, let's go, And that to me is probably the most glaring, consistent, and kind of unexpected pattern I've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, I'm going to combine my next two questions because they're interconnected. And I'm curious about, when you help couples navigate finances, talking about money with your spouse or mate can be one of the most difficult conversations that you can ever have because, it creates tension and animosity sometimes if you're not on the same page. And then secondarily, my friend, I'm curious to ask you about your definition of the modern definition of what it means to live within your means. We've heard that saying for generations, but today, as we've discussed, financially living comfortably or financially living at all takes on a very different sort of outfit that it did 10 or 20 years ago. So how do you help couples sort of navigate their money tension to reduce or minimize the tension? And what do you think about the modern definition of living within your means? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
With couples, I find that people are getting married later in life, and sometimes people come to me. They've been young professionals for a while now. They've managed their own money. They've figured out how to budget it and spend it accordingly. And when they get married, they've been doing it for so long that they kind of keep doing the thing. And so they get married and they have separate accounts and continue managing money that like they have when they were single. And sometimes they create this joint pot of money, joint account for household bills. And that works. I prefer when you're married, the two become one and everything follows accordingly. So both bank accounts become one bank account, investment accounts become one investment account. I think there's a lot more clarity and confidence and understanding in that. And actually, it's more simplistic than having multiple budgets running with a joint shared account, trying to figure out how that money all gets allocated, but still feeling like you're on the same page as a husband and wife. So I prefer when the two become one, I think everything follows suit. So I prefer the one budget, but the two can work. I've seen it work and it can work fine. Here's what doesn't work in any of the scenarios, in any situation, is when there are money secrets. When the husband has a side account that he likes to bet with, or the wife has a hidden spending account she likes to buy things with. Like these are things that I've encountered that secrets don't work with money. So I don't care how many accounts, how you want to handle it, separately, individually. I give you my preferences, but at the end of the day, my non-negotiable is that we can't have secrets. Because if you have secrets, I can't help you. That's a different problem, and that's not one for me to solve because I can't help a secret, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I help couples when it comes to like figuring out how to co-manage money, how to become one. And in terms of the modern day definition of like you said, like you asked, of spending or staying within your means, wow, I think the idea of spending less than you earn will never go away. That's as old as time, and that's really is the path to wealth. I mean, excuse me, spending less than you earn. That idea will never go away. Spending less than you earn has been and always will be the key to wealth. If you make 500K and you live a 500K lifestyle, you don't have any extra money. If you make 100K and live a 50K lifestyle, you have 50K extra, right? Like that's math. Math is not an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my layer on top of it. Like what I would say is if you don't feel like you are working in your genius, in your calling, in your giftedness, you probably will be unfulfilled. And if you're feeling unfulfilled, you try to find fulfillment in other places, and it might come in the form of spending or activities that cost money that you don't need to spend money on. So I challenge people when they have this like way overspending problem, which is more rare than you think. Like I don't encounter too many people who are just spending well beyond their means because they just want it. I challenge them though to say like, well, how are you feeling about how you earn your money today? Do you feel like you're in your genius? You're using your gifts? Or you feel like you're in a calling of kind of pursuing something that you feel called to pursue? Or do you just feel like you're keeping busy making a buck because you have to? And really that unlocks a lot of identity stuff and a lot of conversation around what we talked about earlier. Are you on the right bus? Do you need to start a side hustle? Do you need to change careers? Like sometimes those conversations take turns people never expected, but they're necessary. And that's how I address spending within your means. Because the easy answer is, hey, dummy, don't spend as much as you earn. Then you have less money. You know, like, and that's true, and that always will be true. That has been true, will be true.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nuances to it to say, like, maybe it's a season where you're just redlining everything today, but you're in your calling and you know that there's a brighter future. So like stick with it. You got to do it. Or maybe you know you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're stuck and you're comfortable and you're nervous to make a shift. And I got to shake the tree a little bit to get you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, my final question for you this morning has to do with individual, personal, and professional legacy. You know, as a dad and a husband and someone who homeschools their kids, you've got a unique perspective on, you know, cultivating the next generation and your sort of responsibility to do that. So I'm curious, when you look at your life from a professional and personal standpoint, how do you want your legacy to be defined, my friend?
Wow, that's a wonderful question, and it's not financial. Although a lot of it, probably financially speaking, helps me build a legacy, which is interesting. You know, money conversations are always about the money and never about the money, in my experience, because the money is always the fuel for the thing that is the calling and the legacy. To me, I heard Craig Rochelle say it like this a long time ago, and I kind of have stolen it. I believe that my legacy is going to be what I leave in people and not what I leave for them. So who I who I build up my children to be will matter way more than what I leave them when I'm gone. And so that's how I think about every decision I make today. Like, how am I shaping, forming, molding their character and building them up and almost calling them to a higher identity, what I see in them, and how much am I doing that on a regular basis? That to me is going to be the legacy I leave. It's not going to be the business I build or the money I leave or what I donate to charity or any of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
I would say you can find me on the social platforms, X or Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, even YouTube. I'm about to start a YouTube channel here soon, and most of them are my name. Although YouTube is probably going to be Reconstructing Wealth, it might be the business one, but just at Matt Morizio, search for that, find me. And if you find me on Instagram, let's just say DM me about this podcast. I have a course. I have uploaded it to YouTube. I'm working on putting it on my site with an email and stuff for now. But for now, I'm happy to share it. It's about a 30-minute course. It's broken into 3 or 4 videos, but it totals about 30 minutes. And it's all around like healthy money mindsets and habits, and it gets into some of the blocking and tackling of personal finances, as well as some of the science behind generosity. And I'm happy to share that with anybody who follows me, DMs me. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my friend, I want to thank you for your commitment to making America and the world at large a better and more financially solid place, and uh, financially willing to help others find their version of financial freedom. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation. It's most appreciated, my friend.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me, Kevin. It's an honor. This is a great conversation.